we have as our chief guest a person who is not only a politician, not only a businessman, not only an academic, but also an advocate. He obtained a Bachelor of Jurisprudence in 1984, a Bachelor of Law in 1986, a Master's of Science in International Relations in 1988, and an honorary doctorate in law in 2009. He formerly served as the Premier of Limpopo for 2 full terms and as the Deputy Minister of Correctional Service. He also served as the Minister of Mineral Resources and later as the Minister of Public Service and Administration. And so for this keynote address, there could not have been a more appropriate person than him to embellish, to enhance, to enlighten, and to enrich the occasion. Ladies and gentlemen, I am absolutely delighted to present the guest of honor, Advocate Mwabo Hamatho. Please rise as we give him a round of applause.
I wish to recognize the Master of Ceremony and the MEC in absentia, Acting Chair, Memo Hodi, Negimusa, Kimo Hodi, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. South Africa democracy is 25 years old, and our constitution is 23 years old. As a country, we are in a phase of early adolescence, therefore. We are transitioning into a different season. The foundations were built through our constitution needs to be reviewed from time to time. When we entered into the phase of democracy, we borrowed laws from other countries, different countries, Germany, America, Canada, and so on. Section 25, which is currently a subject of interest to the legislature and parliament. Because my view at the time was that Section 25 denies black people access to land at the time. Because willing buyer, willing seller is quite a problem. Now, we're dealing with your own issues here, and I just want to say that we try to use the legislation because our constitution says we've got to redress the evils of the past, and we have tried over the years to pass some legislation to create an environment in which we'll be able to operate as the state and as a people. So, Preferential Procurement Policy Framework Act of 2000 was enacted. This act seeks and aims to ensure that tenders can be targeted to empower specific groups, such as black women, youth, and black people in general. Bids up to 500 million will be evaluated in terms of the 80-20 percentage point system to help smaller black-owned firms to compete. Public entities, according to this law, will be allowed to negotiate prices and value for money with preferred service providers. Procurement of locally manufactured goods will be supported. Precedence point will be allocated in line with broad-based black economic empowerment status. Compulsory subcontracting of at least 30% for the tenders above 30 million will be implemented. Where feasible, the advance of these designated groups will be prioritized. The question is this happening? We do have the law. I'll come back to the subject later. If it is being implemented, this law, who is monitoring the implementation? There's another piece of legislation, occupation-specific dispensation, OSD. The OSD is the public sector tools to attract and retain skills within the various fields in the public sector. It was introduced through the adoption of a collective agreement, Resolution 1 of 2007. Within the framework of the OSD, the Public Service Coordinating Bargaining Council was established. This occupation-specific dispensation, post and salary structures for engineers and related occupation is applicable to employees who are appointed in terms of the Public Service Act of 1994. That I happen to administer at some point as a minister. Is the implementation of this policy yielding anticipated outcomes? Who is monitoring that if it is not producing those anticipated outcomes? Now, I've just highlighted some of this, but let me just walk you through the entire spectrum. Because what is really happening is that the laws can be there. First, we must set them and change them where the need arises. But the laws don't carry life in themselves. Laws are given life by people. And I believe your organization is a great creation to begin to address the implementation of the laws. I was saying to some colleagues outside there that to defeat apartheid, some of us had to fight with arms in hand. Now, to defeat economic exclusion requires even a much harder struggle from you professionals, black professionals. And to win that war, you've got to organize yourselves and to continue pushing. Because we are talking about breaking barriers. How do you break barriers when you're not struggling? Don't break themselves, the barriers. And this is across the board. You go into mining industry, where I happen to serve as well. Black professionals don't work in there. What happens is you you'll find some ownership of mines by black people, but they hire white contractors. So there are barriers there. And the simple message I want to give is that you have to organize and continue organizing and never give up, never relent. Push as hard as you can, including pushing the government of the day. Because if you don't push the government, you'll find that this procurement, special procurement, whatever, the payments of civil servants, of your contractors, you get jobs as small business people, you are supposed to be paid within 30 days, and it doesn't happen. And when that happens, your small business collapses, and you are pushed back into the villages where I come from. I happen to come from the village, by the way. Now, we have to make sure that we do not relent. And I think that is a very simple message I want to give you. I'm not known for many and long speeches anyway. I tend to be a man who prefers to do things rather than to talk. And thanks for the opportunity. Again, thank you very much. Now I'm being asked if I should field a few questions. I've got a first 12 at Centurion. I can take maybe 4 questions. Because I was scheduled to speak at 10:30. That's why I committed to the other meeting. Yeah. But it's okay, we can do that. Yeah. Right.
Okay, Advocate Ramaphosa, we wish to extend our appreciation for that bold delivery. You have really provided a historic overview of some of the important matters that will be addressed today. So please give him another round of applause. So before we're going to take, we'll just take 1 round of questions, and we'll take 4 questions per round. So let's just, have some hands, and we'll have the microphones ready first. We'll start there. That will be the first one. Let's just take all the questions if there are any more. And there's the second one. Then let's take them in the order, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And very thanks to Dr. Marco in this particular instance. We're very pleased to see him. We have not seen one another for quite some time. My name is James Ngobeni, the former president of SATACO, and one of the persons who have been instrumental with, amongst others, Dean Lechmere and others, during the time when we engaged with public works through Comrade Chef when he was the minister, who constituted some of the things that we believed were very essential to drive the process of transformation. We came with it and thought we have succeeded. But Comrade Ramaphosa, what I can mention is that most of what was done to ensure that you empower the blacks has reversed to the level where today most of the big companies are grade 1 in the market, and not only that, most of the provincial and local governments have changed strategies within which they say, in order for you to get a job within government, in their institutions, you have to, you have to be a member of CESA, which is one organization which is white-driven in this particular instance. That is the level at which things have deteriorated. And on the basis of that, when we talk about transformation, You have highlighted a number of those particular issues. And obviously one of the things that you have as a cornerstone to what you are saying legislation has been instituted to drive these particular processes of transformation. But legislation alone will never ever yield the fruits, the desired fruits. One of the key critical aspects there, I believe, is missing, and you have also highlighted that, relate to the issue of monitoring and evaluation. I think that is one of the key critical aspects that we have forgotten about. Because things happen, but there's no way where we monitor progress. And on the basis of that, this is fundamental that we need to develop a system within which this particular aspect is going to receive the utmost attention, within which we can be able to gauge how government is performing and how the other people are performing. Last but one, which I think is also critical, is when you talk about transformation in South Africa, it only relates to government. When we talk about private sector, if you go to Sente, and here in Pretoria, mainly, then there's numerous structures which are being developed, let alone the other infrastructure. But you will never ever see black faces there. You will see all these big companies, to an extent where our comrades, white comrades, are not even caring about including and bringing in black contractors and consultants in this particular instance. They are doing it alone. And government is silent about that, and there's nothing that we are doing about that. And I think it's one of the things which is fundamental that we need to introduce to share government. What do you do with regard to private sector in terms of what they are doing, and no one is monitoring this particular instance. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Let's have the last question.
Is it me?
If we could have the mic there.
Oh, sorry.
Always trained up.
Advocate, good to see you. My name is Gregory Mufuke. I'm the CEO of the Black Business Council in the built environment. Advocate, the strongest statement you made this morning that resonates with me now is that the basis of apartheid was to exclude us economically. Now, you then look at what is happening now, where you find that we've got the laws that are there, but they're not being implemented properly to make sure that economically we are empowered. Now, how do we do this? Because when we do monitoring and evaluation, we are sitting outside of government, and we try and evaluate how these laws are being implemented, and go back into government to try and advise government to say, but guys, things are not working, can you change the legislation? You find that you are not taken seriously as private sector players. My question is, especially having had the benefit of serving in government, and now in the NEC, who is government listening to? Government listening to? Because we talk all the time. I mean, we're in a transformation summit here. We've been having, I don't know how many transformation summits. Who is government listening to? Because in my mind, when we converge like this and we talk about things that are hindering progress, we expect government, which is here with us, to go back and fix those things. We can't be coming year after year and we're talking about the same thing. So, you have been the minister, Comrade. Who is government listening to? Because clearly we're not being listened to. That's number one. Number two, there is a very strange anomaly here where you find that certain laws apply only in the public sector while others apply both in the public and private. Let me give an example. When you look at the NHDRC, the act applies both in the public and the private sector. So that means the house, your own private house, without complying with the regulations of the NHDRC. But when it comes to the CITP, no, you can only apply in the public sector. Now, I don't understand that. I don't understand that you can have a law that only applies on projects that are public sector related. And now we've been engaged with DPW for the past, I don't know, 5 years, trying to amend the CIDP Act. Every time they start, they stop. They start, they stop. Now can Shaba was, start. One of the things that we said must happen is that the CIDP must apply in the private sector. Why is the CIDP not applicable in the private sector? Yet you have the MSBRC in the same industry that is applicable both in the private and the public sector. It doesn't make sense. So I want to advise Comrade Lamatu to say, when we have these anomalies, I mean from a lawmaker's point of view, how do we address these things? When we find that even the line ministries are not moving fast enough to make sure that changes happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Minister, as you can keep our questions short, we don't want it to be interactive, but let me take two last ones. There was one here, I saw another one. Let me take one last one there so that there's 4, and then we'll have to close it at that.
Thank you very much, Program Director. My name is Martin Sela. I am the CEO of the Engineering Council of South Africa. Thank you very much, Advocate, for a beautiful speech. But in your speech, you kept leaving us with some questions. One common one was, who is monitoring this legislation? Can you just give us the answer before you leave?
And then we can have the one last one there, please, and then we'll allow for responses.
Thank you. My name is Fulana Tobela from the Migrant Business Forum. Mine is not directly directed to Mr. Ramaklil, but general. My concern and observation is that why do we keep on having all these consultative forums when the people that we invite to come to listen to us come here, lecture us, and leave? Which part of learning are we doing? Are they here to tell us what the government functions, or are they here to listen to the cries of people sitting here and how best can we resolve the status quo? Because currently it is as bad as it is. We're sitting here advocating for SMMEs. We have other people out there who contrary speak about when we try to fight the white businesses to empower small SMMEs, to say you legislate about 30% that must go to small businesses, and then you try to impose that to private sector and other public businesses, and then you find our own people who are sitting in power speaking in public to say they will reprimand, it's thievery, I don't understand. Because they clearly don't understand the frustration, because they come here, they lecture, and they leave. They don't listen to all this frustration. I'm frustrated.
Thank you very much. As the audience for those participations and questions, will allow Advocate Ramatoli to respond to the response.
Let me put it this way. I sit in the National Executive of the RC. And we spent 2 or 3 days discussing the economy last week, somewhere, or 2 weeks ago. And we are fully conscious of the difficulties that face blacks in the economy in South Africa, professionals in particular. Even where ministers brief the lawyers, the advocates, they would go for white, not for blacks. I'm just telling you what is happening. Now, this is creating a crisis, because it means that black people, professionals, will never get anywhere again. So we decided in the ANC to establish a monitoring and evaluation committee under the NSA to begin to address some of these things. But if you don't expose the professionals to their field, they lose the skill or they rust. And you leave the economy in the hands of the people who have always been privileged. So we have taken that decision the other day to say we should establish an evaluation and monitoring committee headed by a member of the NEC to evaluate the performance of employees in terms of implementing policies. Because we do have good policies, by the way. But implementation, no. We go the other way around. There's a fellow who was killed by the boss called Steve Biko many years ago. And he was preaching black consciousness, self-trust. But part of the problem is that we don't trust ourselves. Part of the problem. I mean, those of us who are in positions of leadership, who make decisions, prefer to run back to those who have been oppressing us instead of empowering our own people. So the struggle is very complicated. And there were compromises which were made when we did the Constitution, which excluded a lot of economic issues from being attacked at the time. Like I was giving an example of Section 25 on the land redistribution. Now, we try to change that thing now. Which you could have done then when they were at their weakest. They're very grouped. The whites are very grouped, business in particular. Now, and they're resisting at every front, using the Constitution, using the court systems to frustrate transformation. So you find a situation where you are saying there is a law which applies to the public sector but never to the private sector. I'm not aware of that one. I'm trying to be educated. And why would the private sector be excluded? I would not understand that. From the application of a law. But the law applies across the board, in my view and my understanding, to all individuals and all entities, be they private or natural persons. That's my understanding. So this one, I don't understand it. Then if it is if so, it means we have got to revisit that law. Who's government listening to? Let me give you a theory. Government always listens to the ruling class in all over the world. Now, what does that mean? It means he listens to those who have got the money. Not so. So we have to deal with that in the context of the South African situation. In other words, where you've got a black government who continue to listen to white people, you've got to punish it at some point. If they don't listen, if we don't listen, the message must be made loud and clear to the NC or whichever party that, you know guys, you are playing with fire. Because if the inequalities continue, what will happen? There will be another revolution in South Africa. At some point. Now, which would not necessarily be led by the ANC, it might be led by somebody else. So I think some of the resolutions we pass here, you've got to make sure you send to the NC Secretary General himself. And copy maybe to the President. I'm advising the President in the Twin House. And so they'll have to sit and discuss some of this so that there is change, of course. Can you tell us who's monitoring these processes? I think I've answered that earlier to say we are beginning to do so, but yourselves should monitor these things and have instruments which assist you to feedback to one another. And then when there are deviations, to then suggest to us what you think we should do to assist. I've heard one, the last one, it was not directed to me, but I didn't understand the question, but it suggests that the speakers who come here should sit and be with you colleagues for the duration of, maybe I understood that question. Is that it? Yeah. So that you hear the cries of the participants here. Next time I'll correct that and not double pack you. And I'm sure, should I be invited to come back again, I would ask to create a day to at least sit and hear what you are saying. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Advocate Amaklodi. We also have a token of appreciation for you that we would like to deliver. So we'll call on the CEO of CBE and the acting chairperson to deliver that, please. So up to this point, we have really been receiving a high-level perspective on the respective subject matter of transformation. Now, from this point onwards, we will now begin to zoom into some of the specific details, looking at now the specificities. So accordingly then, to set the tone in this regard, allow me to call on the CEO of CBE, Mary Priscilla Mdlalose, and she will be handling the thought-provoking part entitled Setting a Tone, a Past, Present, and Future Mirror. Ms. Mdlalose, please.
Good day. Give us a minute, please. Okay, greetings again. Greetings to the office of the MEC, the Advocate Ramaklodi who has just left, the chairpersons and the presidents of the councils that are present here, national departments and provincial departments that are represented here, the CEOs and registrars that are here, and ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to quickly go through or run through the presentation. My presentation is not long, and especially because the acting chair and the MEC have already touched on some of the items that I wanted to discuss today. So the content will be of my presentation will be the introduction, which I think I'm going to just skip through. I'll also be looking at the problem statement, the feedback on the past transformation indabas, which I think the MEC have touched on, the expectation of the third transformation indaba, and the progress on the implementation of identification of work. We've included this one because I know that it is one of the key areas that you are interested in. And then the introduction, I'm going to jump this one. I know by now everyone knows who CBE is and our key mandate. And the reason for us being here is to look at the legislation that are impacting on the built environment. And then after hearing the acting chair, the MEC, and the advocate, I think we can all agree that it's like we are doing one and the same thing over and over and over again. The definition of that is called insanity. Perhaps we can check ourselves into verse opis, because it means we've been in this mountain for 25 years. Things are not moving. I'm just going to highlight a few. Again, it might look like a repetition of what has been said before, but just to highlight a few areas that perhaps will form part of our discussion today. What has changed in our 25 years of democracy, especially around the built environment? I think you can agree with me that as much as we are putting so much energy into trying to transform the built environment, it seems as if we are not moving an inch. Let us first look at the numbers. I don't have a slide that talks to the numbers, but I'll just talk to the average. The number of previously disadvantaged individuals registered as professionals across is still very low. Our recent reports, we are looking at the average of only 27%. And again, if you compare this with our demographics, you can see that there's something that is not right there. And then on the average, females only constitute 11%. Again, when you study the demographics of our country, we know that females are about 51%. Legislation such as PFA and the BE Act, these were created to redress the imbalances of the past. But really, have we yielded any desired outcomes? Especially when we are looking at our built environment professionals. The councils for the built environment professions, particularly those with low registration numbers, are experiencing challenges to implement their legislative mandate, as they do not generate sufficient revenue from registration fees to sustain themselves. Remember, this also depends on whether the professionals themselves are employed and they are running successful businesses. So these councils, they rely on the registration from those built environment professionals. There are critical issues within the built environment. There is the issue of non-compulsory registration for persons that are practicing within our sector. This This also influences the low registration numbers that we have within our councils. There is also the issue of lack of enforcement of identification of work for the professions. This also has resulted in the persons or professionals that are operating in an unregulated environment. I want to say that I think Gregory has mentioned that CBE has started to gazette the scope of work. We have been engaging with the Competitions Commission, and I think in that area we are making a stride. The poor retention of built environment professionals by the public sector due to policies such as the OSD. Where we go as CBE, the OSD becomes a thorny issue, that we cannot attract and retain built environment professionals within the public sector because of this policy. So these are some of the things that we want to engage with during this Transformation INDABA. The tender systems. We have had discussions around the tender systems that they are not addressing the imbalances of the past. Again, we need to look into this, whether we want to continue with the tender systems. We need to engage our government. We need to go to those offices. We need to engage the president so that all these issues that are not changing, that are not helping us to change the built environment, they need to be scrapped off. Discount by businesses. I know that, again, the culprit here is the public sector. We need to engage with those issues. Lack of monitoring, the implementation of policies which are meant to redress the past is also an issue, because we need to monitor everything. We need to monitor processes. We need to monitor the policies so that we are able to review where there is a need to do so. This is a sinking ship. Are we part of this sinking ship? If so, I think we need to try some things. We need to change, because otherwise we'll disappear. The MEC mentioned on the outcome of our past Transformation INDABAs. We started in 2017. And the purpose of this Transformation INDABAs is to gauge the status of transformation. We need to gauge this year in and year out. It is also to provide a platform for collaboration and sharing of knowledge among academia, the public and the private sector. We need to interrogate challenges and possible recommendations and solutions from multidimensional perspectives. When we talk transformation, we cannot talk this alone as CBE. We need each and every one of the stakeholders so that we are able to come up with solutions and unblock those areas where we feel that there are blockages. It also gives us an opportunity to mobilize resources towards built environment skills pipeline and report on how these are utilized. And then lastly, it is to track the overall progress of transformation in the South African built environment on a yearly basis. So we had our first INDABA in 2017. We signed the Declaration of Intent, and the content of that Declaration in Intent is as follows. We are saying as the sector, we need to generate focus and synergy in developing a unified transformation agenda for the built environment sector for South Africa. Sometimes when we talk transformation, it's like we are not talking with one voice, and perhaps we are not together understanding what we mean by transformation. So it is important for us to come together and develop a unified transformation agenda so that we can move together and we can move forward together. It is also to collaboratively drive the transformation agenda of the built environment sector of South Africa, participate actively in joint initiatives that advances transformation in the sector. Sometimes there is duplication of resources, and we also work in silos. But if we, from time to time, we come together in this fashion, we are able to understand who is doing what and try to forge partnerships with those people so that we can make impact in the areas of our, where we are making interventions. It is to coordinate efforts to unblock skills pipeline and ensure a sustainable supply of aptly skilled and quality individuals to meet future demands. It is also to collaboratively develop a quality assured support scheme for learners and graduates. For us to see transformation happening within the sector, we need to start from the entry point. And again, we need to do this together. And then lastly, it is to generate partnerships and working relationships across private and public sector so that we are driving together these transformation initiatives. And then this year, beginning of this year, we had our second Transformation INDABA. We were supposed to have this last year in October, but there were some delays. So as a result, it was done in 2019. But this one, it was part of the 2018 Transformation INDABA. The intention of that was to mobilize resources to support skills pipeline program and to prepare the sector for the fourth industrial revolution. CBE tried to forge partnerships. One of the partners that we have established is Standard Bank's Phoenix crowdfunding. So this is a solution which it is an electronic platform that creates a network of givers by connecting them to the individuals and the students that require funding. CBE has also created their own or our own bank account. We are also encouraging sponsors to use this account so that we can support the initiatives out there. And then we also have a list of mentors that who have volunteered their services, and we are again going to continue to work with them so that we are able to also mentor the candidates, but not just the candidates, and also the interns that are at the universities of technologies. And then today we are in our third Transformation INDABA. I know that it seems like we are here, this is a talk show, but we don't want these things to become a talk show. We want to develop strategies, we want to develop solutions that will change our industry. So the outcome for today is to unlock economic opportunities for the sector through the reviews of policies and processes that have been identified as hindrances to transformation. But also, as we engage the industry, we might find that there are still policy gaps that we need to identify and together and present those to the policy makers so that they improve our transformation. And then just on a quick one, I think Grigori has already alluded that CBE has already gazetted the scope of work. We have engaged the Competitions Commission, and I think that we are moving forward with making sure that we gazette all the scope of work for all the 6 councils for the built environment professions. So, but we are going to continue to engage the Competitions Commission because in their unit they have what they call the advocacy unit. So we are going to engage them further so that we get more inputs on the identification of work framework and the identification of work policies of the 6 councils. I just want to say that as much as we will be gazetting the scope of work, but the issue here is the implementation of this identification of work. So that is why we'll continue to engage the councils, but we'll also continue to engage the Competitions Commission so that as soon as this identification of work is gazetted, the councils will be able to implement it as soon as possible. So where do we go from here? I just want to emphasize the importance of collaboration, that as a sector, I think Advocate Ramatlodi has indicated that we need to, the struggle should continue. So, and this struggle cannot happen if you are alone. We need to mobilize ourselves, we need to come together. So it means we need to work in a collaborative manner so that we are able to address all the issues that are facing our industry. CBE is developing an integrated electronic built environment system. We are hoping that this system is going to help us to improve and manage our stakeholder engagement, because we want to continue to engage with the sector. We don't want to be a once-off event, but we want to continue, we want to develop forums so that we continue until we get the breakthroughs that on the issues that we are facing. But another thing that CBE is looking at is the joint marketing. We believe that our built environment professions are not that well marketed, especially in municipalities. So again, we want to mobilize and encourage this working together so that together we can market our professions, as I've mentioned, especially in municipalities. We must also continue to work together. There are advocacy initiatives that we need to engage on, and we need those partnerships to continue. And CBE is positioning herself to lead, regulate, advise, and coordinate the professions and their councils so that all of us are able to meet the national built environment and transformation future of the industry. And then in conclusion, together, let us build an intelligent, inclusive, adaptive, and a thriving built environment. Thank you.
CEO, we want to thank you for that presentation. You have really set the tone for us in that regard, and we really see some direction. Ladies and gentlemen, please give another round of applause. Now, in the year 2000, the Preferential Procurement Policy Framework Act was promulgated. Now, at the time, there was a sense of optimism in the air, for it was long believed that that piece of legislation would transform the economic landscape of South Africa, bringing economic emancipation to the vast masses. It is now almost 2 decades later, and well, our hope continues to linger on. Having said that, allow me to call upon Ms. Mashaba, who will unpack this legislative framework for us, giving us both the good and the bad. Ms. Mashaba is a Director of Supply Chain Management from the National Treasury, and she will be handling the thought-provoking part addressing the impact of the triple PFA in the public sector. Ms. Mashaba, please address us.
Thank you, Chair. I will actually observe all protocol in the House without mentioning, because I don't want to run the risk of making a mistake. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Pirinyesihle Mashabani from Office of the Chief Procurement Officer at National Treasury. Truth be told, I think I should not be making this presentation given everything that has been said, save to actually let you know, because I think we're in this room because we have problems, especially with the FFA regulations and the implementation thereof. I would rather take the room through the challenges that we see within National Treasury, OCPO, and some of the issues that we are currently addressing, and also some of the initiatives and engagements that we have. I think it's quite important because what we have noticed in most of our engagement is most of our colleagues and most of individuals, organizations that we engage, sometimes we engage from the point of not being informed. And it becomes very, very, very difficult to actually address something when both parties are frustrated, but both parties are not informed. One is not informed with the concern and the frustration. Can I take it? Can I take it out? Thank you. It's like frustrating me. Thank you. It's very much important because what is happening in National Treasury at the moment, since the SIPDM, which all of us know, the OCPO is actually looking at construction procurement now as more of a division that is within National Treasury. Previously, it was not there. When we were actually regulating procurement, it was procurement for all sectors, and it was not specifically to construction, obviously, because we have CIDB, CBE who are actually playing in that space. But what has happened is that you say we're going to come in, not playing the space where CIDB is playing, not playing the space where CBE is playing, but as National Treasury, we need to be mindful of this specific sector and also make sure that we are not frustrating the sector. And then I think the SIPDM opened our eyes in that regard. So to that end, as we know that the SIPDM is repealed from 1st of October, we're actually now participating in terms of engaging as to what is really happening within the sector, both internally actually, because even with our colleagues who are within National Treasury, we're engaging them, and within OCPO as well. So for us, this platform is very critical because it's actually getting us at that stage where we are initiating our engagements even within National Treasury. What is critical, colleagues? As part of the content, I will look at the key cabinet decision that was taken in regard to supply chain management. I will look at what is the weakest link within public procurement, and I will look at public procurement is strategic to the transformation agenda, because as long as we do not play together and only one part is playing and the other part is not, we will always have a problem. And it's important for me just to scan through the regulatory landscape, because that also becomes a problem in terms of understanding. Because when we engage, you find that just because we lack a particular understanding, we actually start engaging in a manner that is not constructive. And also, does it hinder transformation? We'll then look at the framework that we have, that we've just issued, that repealed, if I can put it that way, the SIPDM. Colleagues, in 2014, this is important, because one of the issues that we have in Treasury, what we have noticed as a problem is the reason why we cannot properly implement our policies, because issues of policy is at the implementation stage, as we all had, that we've got good policies, but are we able to implement them? The challenge that we have realized is that within our departments, municipalities, public entities, some of them, not all, we have a challenge when it comes to where supply chain management is and how it's operating, and the level at which it's operating. It's not strategic in most instances, and yet it is a deal breaker in any institution. Supply chain management is. We find that at the strategic level, where decisions need to be made, supply chain management is not there. And these policies that are being issued by National Treasury are actually controlled by a group of individuals in a small corner there who are in the supply chain management unit. And it's not something that is owned by the accounting officer, head of department. And that is a serious issue. Because what is required, we require organizations or department to actually have a supply chain management system that has got an ability to take the mandate of the institution up to service delivery. And within these supply chain management individuals, they truly understand the mandate of the institution. If it is construction, we need people in the space that can actually understand what we need when we have to acquire that particular service. What we have in the state right now, I'm from supply chain, so I'm talking from what's really happening there. We have supply chain practitioners, which you find as a problem, who actually haven't got a clue what they are buying. All that we have, we receive an order, and you put in your policies that come from National Treasury, and that's it. Anything else, I'm not interested. And when we've got technical individuals coming in to actually explain and engage, we always say it doesn't work in that way. It's not allowed. Rules don't allow. That is what we normally say. But it is because supply chain management has not been put at a strategic level where it links the processes to the mandate of the institution. That is the challenge, one of the challenges. If we can, especially when it comes to construction and all those institutions that are actually, whose responsibility is to deliver in the space, if we can actually start having our supply chain practitioners understanding that industry, and the supply chain system forces both supply chain and technical to work together, because supply chain system and the supply chain units are two different things. But in all our institutions, we do not have, well, most, if I can put it that way, we do not have systems. We've got units and policies. And the policy is nothing else but what is issued by National Treasury. That is the challenge. And when we look at policies from institutions, SCM policies, it's nothing else but 3 quotations, go out to tender and everything. It does not talk to the mandate of the institution. And that is the skill that we require. So the former Chief Procurement Officer raised this at a cabinet level, and it was actually resolved, if I can put it that way, that SCM, as from 1st of April 2015, accounting officers, HODs, they must have SCM performance criteria in their performance agreement. And they have to understand. That is where we make strategic decisions in terms of empowerment policies as well. But when we take that particular tender to the supply chain unit, and that supply chain unit decides whether our subcontract, it's too late in the day. It needs to talk to the policy of the institution, and that we do not have in most instances. So even the issue of monitoring, even at an institutional level, at a departmental level, we need to monitor our own, because that will be informed by the policy, or by our empowerment policy that we have adopted as an institution. Maybe some would say, we have done that, but National Treasury will come and say, no, we don't have to go that route. This is not in line with the actual framework that we have. That is a different engagement. But at least, let's engage when there is a policy that is in place when it comes to institutions. So most of the institutions that we engage, when we submit tenders, most of the time there is no policy to empower you, except relying on what was issued at a regulatory level, and never operationalize within the very institutions that are supposed to be driving these particular policies. So this is, ladies and gentlemen, from 2015, we should be seeing supply chain management improving, in that accounting officers are now taking responsibility at a high level, and supply chain systems are implemented in institutions, more than supply chain units who are doing nothing else but implementing what came from National Treasury and not operationalize it in their own policies. So we look at these colleagues, which has been a debate within National Treasury as well, especially in this division that I'm talking about, the one that looks at construction procurement, as to what is the weakest link? What the issue that has been identified, especially our current acting CPO always said this, especially these days. Supply chain management or public procurement is over-regulated for starters, but it's actually giving effect to so many things. Within this procurement process, we need to make sure that quality is not compromised. Good governance is not compromised. Local content is not compromised. Economic development, black economic empowerment. We need to make sure that tax issues, which is not really our responsibility, that is SARS. But SARS is using public procurement to monitor its own. Even with the issues of BE, which is DTI, it came through National Treasury through public procurement as well. We have to look at value for money. This policy that needs to be issued needs to balance all this. And then the question that asks, where is the weakest link? Because when you look at all this, say, transformation is actually hindered by public procurement. What is it that it is really supposed to do from National Treasury perspective, given the mandate of National Treasury? And also, looking at this, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, the fact that there is also trust deficit that we have in most institutions. When you look at supply chain management, we don't trust each other. I'm not trusted, I don't trust the accounting office, I don't trust the CFO, I don't trust that. There's a whole lot of issues, and then it gets into the supply chain space. And also capacity, that's the major issue that we have, issues of capacity. As long as we do not have the right capacity. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not talking about capacity to understand National Treasury's regulation, because that is not a procurement person. That is not a supply chain management person. I'm talking about the capacity. I'm talking about a person that understands the product that you're procuring, that understands the market, that understands the frustration and the constraints within that market. That is not what is happening within the public sector. But that is one thing that, as we're engaging specifically in the construction space, that is what we're actually engaging in discussing and hoping that as we engage with various departments, as we're doing roadshows with various departments, this is what we're saying to actually various departments and municipalities, that we need to make sure that we've got the right people in the right space, and that is what our framework is actually advocating as well. So these are the challenges that we need to be mindful of as we engage. Especially with the commissions. I'm really looking forward to tomorrow's commissions, and especially from National Treasury, whatever that will be coming out of that, specifically the one that talks about preferential procurement. Really looking forward to that, because that will also help us to have something when we go back to the office to engage further and say, this is the voice that we have actually been given. And colleagues, one of the things that we're looking at in terms of public procurement, this is what I'm saying, this is more like a thought-provoking kind of a presentation, so that when we engage, we understand this. One of the issues that has been a frustration to us is that public procurement, yes, it has to be used for part of that space that transforms. But when we engage in some instances, it is more like public procurement is the only transformation tool in the mind of others. And we know that it cannot be, because we've got so many sectors that have got their own roles, their own games. We've got so many role players. And one of the things that we argue is that if you need to transform me, as a person, as a black person, for you to transform me, you have not given me a home, a house, which is my right. I don't have electricity. I don't have the right in terms of integrated transport system where I can go and submit my tenders. I actually use the tendering process to get what is rightfully mine constitutionally. And I'm actually competing with my counterpart who has got everything. When we talk about economic transformation, it makes sense for my counterpart. Because he's got everything. All that he does is get into business and make profit. For me, is to get my child to school, is to have electricity. For me, it is a different thing. So he's saying that make sure that all role players are playing their part, so that when we get into the procurement space, when we talk economic transformation, it means the same thing. We are both talking profit. We're both talking playing in the game. For me, it's an issue of survival. It's from the plate to my mouth. For the other, it's an issue of investment. So we say, let's make sure that when we make it strategic, let it be strategic. And colleagues, this is just, I'm not going to talk through this because we dealt with the issue of regulatory, but what is important to me is that we have to see that in the Constitution we've got 217 that is talking to the actual system that is fair, equitable, transparent, competitive. This is the responsibility of the accounting officer. It's because it says the organ of state must have the system, not national treasury. And that is what we're saying, organs of state put in a system. Accounting officers, as per the PFMA, they have to maintain an appropriate system. If the accounting officer is in the construction space, that particular institution, then that accounting officer has to make sure that they maintain an appropriate procurement system that talks, that's why it is appropriate, it talks to what they're actually doing. And the National Treasury makes regulations and issue instructions, which actually what we are about. And then to Section 217, that is where the FFA comes in, which is the blue part on the other side, and both of them, they're giving effect to Section 217 of the Constitution. So we have to actually balance these two, 2171, 2172, and 3. And the other one talks good governance, talks profits and whatever, the other one talks empowerment. So we need to balance those two for PFMA and MFMA. And colleagues, does it hinder transformation? I think from the regulator's point of view, when it comes to BEE, that's something that we need to look at. Because truth be told, we know that when we look at BEE and look at HDI, those are two different things. A BEE and HDI is a different thing. The original regulations were very specific to HDI. You would actually go and say, I will tell you how many women I have engaged, and I can tell you they were not fronting because I went and I checked them and I checked everything. It is difficult now with the scorecard because the scorecard has got all these elements, and you can't pull empowerment from the scorecard to tell you all this truth. The empowerment that you want, you can't pull it properly from the scorecard as it was easy previously. And in terms of organs of state, they don't have SCM policies that will help us. We are engaging them in that space. Issues of good governance, demand planning, we're not planning properly within the organs of state. Issues of payment of invoices is a serious issue, ladies and gentlemen, because we normally say, if you're not going to pay me, why empower me? Why lie to me and say you're empowering me, only to destroy me because I'm not going to pay me? What we are trying to do in the framework that we've issued, we have a control that actually forces the accounting officer to say, we will honor this commitment. We are having engagement with implementing agencies as well as to how to actually clear that part. But for all organs of state, there is a gate before you go out to tender where you commit that we are going to honor this commitment. It's just one of the ways that we're trying to deal with the issues of non-payment. And the reason why we're putting that in, so that should there be an issue of non-payment in a particular setup, we have a point of departure, because there was a time when within the institution before we went out, we knew that we were going to honor the commitment. But we're going to actually just clear the path as to how it's done, because when we met with state-owned entities, we have to have a different approach, but the principle is not going to be compromised. And also issues of effective subcontracting strategies, we found that missing. Registration of professionals and the rules, all those things are things that actually place within the supply chain management, within the procurement space, where we need to join hands when we actually work in that space. And just in issues of the framework that I've been talking about now, ladies and gentlemen, you remember that we had a standard that was issued, and that standard has been repealed for mainly, I must say that the standard in itself, when you look at the content of it, you see best practice, you see good governance in the standard. It's good. It's good. But when you look closer in the standard, you see issues of transformation compromised. So because of that, we had to deal with the standard. And it is important that we realize that national trade is not saying the standard in itself, in terms of other good governance issues, you throw it away. But to the extent that it does not comply with the policies of government, that is where we have an issue, and we had to deal with that. So in repealing that standard, we introduced, as of the 1st of October, the standard is no longer in place. In repealing that standard, we actually came up with the framework for infrastructure delivery. The framework, all that it does, ladies and gentlemen, is just it's just a framework, gates. Because, especially in the procurement side, because when you look at procurement, whether in South Africa, anyway, there are gates that you need to go through. And those gates were blurred. So what we put in the standard, we've identified those gates. We need those gates to be signed off. We need the accounting officer to actually delegate those gates. And when AG comes, because we engage AG in this process, when AG comes, AG will have a list of who signed when and when. So no one will say, I wasn't aware, we don't know what is happening. We know who actually said it's good to go, who actually said we have sufficient funds, we know all those processes. It's just that simple process that we brought in. The in-between, it should be the governance processes within the institution. It brings in the issue of accountability as well. We have taken the process back to the accounting officer, because that is what the PFMA said. National Treasury, what National Treasury has been doing in most cases, we've been regulating and sending practice notes and everything else on areas that are supposed to be the accounting officers. By saying in the construction space, we are pulling back, we are responsible for this, but these gates, we need to know what decisions and who made those decisions. And in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, we all need to work together, because each and every one of us have got a part that needs to fit and make sure that we as a country are better off. Especially from our side, in the procurement, in the public procurement side, if we can participate in this process to actually ensure that what our contribution contributes effectively, we will have done, I guess, what we are employed to do. Thank you.
Ms. Mashaba, we thank you very much. That was a very informative delivery, and we'll certainly indulge further during the question and answer discussion and tomorrow during the session. Ladies and gentlemen, please give her another round of applause. Having listened to the respective speakers, it has certainly become clear that there are numerous challenges when it comes to the implementation of various legislation around transformation. So accordingly then, allow me to call upon Mr. Vasnar Shabangwani, and he will be handling the very subject, namely challenges on the implementation of the respective transformation legislation. We look forward to it. Mr. Shabangwani, we are listening. to the MEC of Public Works, of the industry, amongst ourselves, and to everybody that has an interest in the built environment, I greet you all. Mine is just to reflect on challenges that are really impeding the delivery of the transformation in the infrastructure sector. But before I could do that, when I was provided with this particular heading or title to address or deal with, I had to reflect what is it that is required to really advance this particular course. And I came to a conclusion that we require what we call transformational leadership. And I further prodded on that particular area to say, what is it that we call transformational leadership? And I came to a conclusion that transformational leadership refers to leaders who set a direction and help themselves, including others, to do the right thing and to move forward. To do this, they create an inspiring vision, then motivate and inspire others to reach that vision. They also manage delivery of the vision, either directly or indirectly. Lastly, they create a mechanism to receive feedback for improved delivery of the said vision, no longer listening or having an ear to listen, but have heart to listen and implement what is supposed to be implemented to achieve that vision. On that basis, ladies and gentlemen, I have now to address the real issues that actually confront us. I'm not going to deal with the issues of the content. I'll go straight in terms of the purpose of this particular presentation. The presentation highlights the current impediments of implementing the Provincial Procurement Regulation 2017 issued in terms of the Section 5 of the PPP Framework Act. And this particular act regulates the 30% SMME subcontracting requirements. And also, from our own perspective, we want to provide the feasible methods of implementation that will reduce the number of non-responsive bids, which of course is a mechanism or vehicle to ensure that this transformation happens, and ultimately to speed up the project implementation and service delivery. It's important also to highlight to the audience that in terms of my background that I've outlined, is that the implementation of this regulation is very problematic, and I have to be upfront. Unfortunately, my colleagues who are responsible for regulations are here, which result, of course, in more bidders being more and non-responsive, and many bids are awarded at a higher cost to the state. And also, this regulation creates that enabling environment for the community unrest, where we have projects that are being stopped. And in that instance, we have the lives of the people who are responsible of these projects being threatened or put at risk. And I felt initially that in order for me to proceed and make pronouncement on this particular aspect, I need to give, reference or flesh to this particular regulation that I'm talking about. But I'm just going to talk to the high level in this regard. The regulation states that if feasible, the contracts above 30 million, an organ of state must apply subcontracting to advance the designated group, which is quite a very good approach. The term feasible, in our understanding, is used in recognition of the fact that it may not always be feasible to subcontract in all tenders due to the nature of some of the tenders.
For instance, I've just put actually one aspect here. It may not be possible to subcontract one piece of machinery that is above 30%. So that is one of the impediments. Therefore, the onus lies with the various institutions to identify opportunities that will be aligned to the designated groups. Again, the regulation stipulates that tenders must be advertised with the condition that the tenderers who fail to comply with this requirement will be disqualified. What does this mean? It means if you don't adhere to any of those requirements, that particular bidder will be regarded as non-responsive. Again, the institution must conduct the market research or industry research to identify the level of transformation in the sector or in that commodity. And also the role players and their CBE status level. The central database at National Treasury has been upgraded to allow the bidders, contractors, suppliers to access this CSD for identification of the potential subcontractors from the pool of EMEs, QSEs to advance these transformation agenda through these designated groups. Again, the legislation requires the tenderers to submit proof of subcontracting arrangements between the main tenderer and the subcontractor. The proof of subcontracting arrangement may include subcontracting agreement between the main tenderer and the subcontractor. Remember, this is a process that happened before the award. This is happening during the advert period. The responsibility for inclusion of these subcontracting clause in the tender rests with the institution, being the Department of Public Peace under this instance. The responsibility of the subcontractor with competent and capable subcontractor rests with the main contractor, which is obviously correct. The contract will be concluded between the main contractor and the institution. Therefore, the main contractor, not the subcontractor, will be held liable for performance in terms of these contractual obligations. Tenderers who do not meet subcontracting requirements are considered as being not acceptable tenders and must be disqualified, as I've earlier alluded to. The report containing the list of potential subcontractors may be drawn by accessing a particular link which is outlined, where you will have a full access to these designated groups. The facts of the matter are as follows. The regulation is welcomed by all and is necessary to transform the industry and uplift the previously disadvantaged to promote all-inclusive economic growth. We cannot argue against that. This is also not something new, especially as the Department of Public Works. Many years ago, bidders tendered on contract participation goal, which we used to call CPG, to employ emerging contractors which exceeded expectation on most of our projects with minimal challenges. Treasury, I need to indicate this, indicated that all SMMEs must be fully compliant up to the date of the award and issuing the letter of acceptance. Bidders are deemed to be non-responsive if any number of SMEs are non-compliant. Remember, under these instances, the department or the organ of state is not entering into a contract with the SMEs, but the main contractor. I think all of us are familiar with that. This requirement brings about two problems, which I request all of you to apply your mind on and digest it intensely. Firstly, the extended tender periods of 60 days is deemed too short, as the main bidders must source fully compliant SMMEs who are registered on a CSD and the CIDB, and who are active, as well as tax matters being in order. In principle, this is correct, but in reality this is not easily achieved, as most of the level 1 to 4 SMMEs are not active as they did not have work or do not have the funds to obtain tax care certificate due to either being in arrears or any other causes that may lead them to that particular level. This result is that bidders are then forced, and those who are contractors will probably attest to this, are forced to pay tax monies on behalf of them in order to be compliant, without even knowing whether the fact or in fact the project will be awarded to them. So we regard this as something that it's a burden to the main bidders. The second challenge is that one of the SMEs may become non-compliant or non-compliant in terms of those requirements between the date of evaluation up to the final award, which will then render that particular bid non-responsive, upon which the evaluation process must start all over again. This is an impediment to service delivery and also an impediment to the objective in which we intended to achieve. Insisting on having to enter into agreements with SMMEs by the bidders or the main bidders at tender stage, it's very unpractical and difficult. One of the reasons is as follows. Why do you insist on an agreement between the main contractor and the subcontractor and the list of SMME subcontractors at tender stage if it's about to change during the execution, and the level of achievement will only be determined at the completion of the project? That's a thought that you need to digest. Agreements are entered with SMEs, creating expectations while not knowing which bidder will be successful. Because there's too much effort in that particular process. SMEs will be running up and down, trying to put their act together for that particular bid. Remember, it's not only one bidder. All the bidders that have got interest may be actually going to that particular pool. So you may find that one subcontractor is running with 7. So the SMEs incur vast amounts of costs to be registered and to become active, hoping that they will be getting some work. Again, SMEs also do not want to enter into agreements with all the prospective bidders for some other reasons. What does it do? It disadvantages good, capable bidders, or those who cannot lay hands in terms of the agreement with those subcontractors are left out. They may be very good and capable. In the event of awarding a bid to a bidder who has not sourced SMEs from the right area, when I say right area, you will understand in terms of the locality of that particular project. It is guaranteed that there will be labor unrest and the projects are brought to a standstill by either the local communities or particular forums. These result in a huge financial cost to the state. Just to give you an illustration, if a particular project is going to be implemented here in Pretoria CBD, there are various areas within Pretoria CBD. When you meet there or we go to the site to hand over the site, the local forums or the community says the bidders or the subcontractors that we have are not in the close proximity to the site. There are those who are on the other side. So you have to start afresh with that particular process. But if you're allowed to engage at that particular point, not prior, you will be resolving the issue with the communities and move forward with speed. Further challenges. It is also unfair to expect the bidder to enter into agreements with the SMEs prior to the invitation of the bids. That's what we are saying. Or even just prior to award, for that matter. As in most instances, the SMME's services will only be required after 6 months, even 3 years after the commencement of the project, depending on where does that particular activity lies in the schedule of the project. Furthermore, the SMEs may not even be in business anymore at that particular time and may become non-compliant and be overcommitted at the time when their services are required. Again, I need to mention that it is estimated that about 30 to 50% of the SMEs will be changed during the construction period for the same reasons as I have alluded earlier on. What are the recommended changes as far as public works is concerned, and to those who share the same aspirations with us? Taking note that the aim of this regulation is to transform the construction industry while uplifting the previously disadvantaged. Inadvertently, the regulation is impeding the implementation of projects due to the vast number of non-responsive bids, resulting in missed employment opportunities either as a direct labor, as an SME, or as a supplier. And those who are on the cold face of it, typical example to this, we have got huge projects that currently we cannot conclude on the basis of these processes that have been regulated, which could be far better handled post the award. And that particular process is affecting service delivery. The budget has already been allocated by National Treasury, but we can't spend because of all these impediments. But we're not saying this is a whole impediment, but there are other factors which we can talk about if we're allowed to deal with those issues. Secondly, subcontracting should not be a responsive criteria at all. All subcontracting should be implemented after or post the award. As part of the recommended changes, we are saying enforcing the rule of having to enter into agreement at tender stage boils down to a form of nominated subcontracting, which brings about its own challenges. The bidder then reserves the right to only use the SMSs with whom they have entered into agreements. That's what it means. You cannot deviate from those that you have entered into agreement. If you do that, you're in violation of the very same regulation. In reality, the local community and SMEs forums will not allow this to happen, and the bidder will be forced to source other SMEs, which nullifies the requirement for having to submit the details and agreements prior to tender as a responsive criteria. So, what are we saying in terms of this particular statement? We are recommending that the 30% subcontracting must be a condition of tender to advance that very same objective, which could be managed post-award through a transparent process. That is our viewpoint. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, Mr. Shabangwani, we certainly enjoyed that enlightening delivery, and we thank you very much for that. Could you please give him another one? Ladies and gentlemen, we are trying to raise the enemy. However, we want to, as we promised, have a question and answer discussion. So what we want to do then, we want to ask the presenters, Ms. Mutalosa, Ms. Mashaba, and Mr. Shabangwani, to please take their seat here in front as we open the floor up for various questions. So we will also handle this matter then in the same manner as we await the speakers to please take their respective seats. We will also handle this question and answer discussion in the same manner. I suggest we take 2 rounds. We will have 4 questions per round. So as they come up to take their seats, perhaps we can already start with the hands. There is Ms. Plena, that will be the first one. I saw the hand there at the back, that will be the second one. Then that will be the third one here. I'm going to try to take ones we were not asked before. So that will be the 4th one. So that will be the first round. Let's take the second round as well. We'll be able to manage it. So the second round, we'll ask the gentleman here. We'll ask the lady. And nothing is going to be confused. Let's take the first round first, please. Because the gentlemen with the mics are saying it's going to be confusing. Okay, so let's take the first round then. Can you just confirm who it was? It was Ms. Taylor. It was there at the back of the gentleman here. And it was, who was the 4th one? Okay, then there was a 4th. So let's take that in that order. Thank you very much. I think let's take them in that order. We have vice here who could also be wise with time since our lunch time is in. But let's take those questions, please, in that order.
If I may ask, can we pose all the questions to all of them once over so that I can
Yes.
I've got 3 questions for Ms. National Treasurer, Ms. Nashavan. My first question is that my name is Monique Klina. I'm a quantity surveyor by profession. My first question is that why do you believe under PPFA Act, as you state that you award to the highest ranked supplier or contract of the CIDB, it must be only enforced to public? Second question is that the whole procurement supply chain management is followed by it's what regulates the country. But who regulates the profession? Where do I take it up if then the one of the procurement practitioner, I feel it's not, I just want to understand what regulates your professional conduct as the supply chain practitioners. The last one for the National Treasury is that it's quite interesting that the built environment employ a lot of people, and then it also have so much money that we contribute on GDP. But my question is that, quite interesting, in most of the audit reports assigned by the CAs on infrastructure projects, no one of the infrastructure practitioner or professional is get involved. Do they know what is a violation order? Do they know what actually they are auditing? When even signing it off, do you know whether that cost is ballooned? You don't even know whether we pay what is value for money. And the other thing that also is that I just want to understand is that why are they allowed to so much deviate in their scope? Because when you are appointing them, you appoint them as auditors, but they've got a right to tell whatever. And they can appoint an engineer, they can appoint a quantity surveyor, and they can appoint, when you look at the fees that you actually pay them, it's actually more than on both environment profession.
Thank you very much for those questions.
And the last one is for Mr. Shabakwani, that is public works. Oh, Shabakwani, I've got only one question for you, sir. Quite interestingly so, the same PPFA Act, it says BEE status, where you are doing the 90-10 or 80-10, whatever it comes, you give the points on that part of the BEE. But quite interestingly, you appoint me as a BEE level 1, but on implementation, I'm holding the whole non-South African. So it means I did get that tender fraudulent. Who monitors that? Who are you actually transforming? Because surprisingly so, the built environment, little bit I know, is the most regulated, but is the most undermined profession in all built environment. Because you must tell me, in public works, you appoint Noni as a principal agent on a professional, but the whole of my trade, non-South Africans that are following me, who are you transforming?
Thank you very much. Let's have the second one. Thank you, Master Solomon.
To the National Treasury, I think it is time that we look at supply chain as a standalone. My concern is that the government supply chain is under financed. And when supply chain has to give report, I wonder if they would give reports in terms of what they are expected to deliver. Because as far as you look at supply chain, transformation can easily be done. And your CFO, if they have to give a report, to them what matters is the bottom line. Whether they save money, whether they lose money, or transformation becomes secondary. Right? My second issue is that when it comes to payment, especially on the
on the subcontractor, and this is to both public works and treasury. Is it possible, the discussion has been that which is something that the Business Council in the Built Environment proposed. We would like to see the subcontractors being paid directly. The biggest challenge that you have is that main contractor has got a banking account and the bank says to him, for example, if you put 10 million for about 3 days, you get so much interest. Maybe even longer, I'm just making a simple example. The challenge we've got is that they don't pay the subcontractor as they get paid. They pay the subcontractor somewhere down the line, and that creates a problem. And then the other, to public works as well. When you employ subcontractors at forums, it's important that the main contractor, as and when they tender, to engage forums, to eliminate those kind of problems. I do understand where you're going in terms of appointing subcontractors on award, but then you're going to have a stampede. Because now we all know that you've got a job. But prior to that, you are in a position to negotiate. Before you then, once you've been awarded, then your powers to negotiate becomes almost eliminated. So it's important for us to come in with a middle room. I'm engaging some other forums where, for them to understand what is coming in their municipality, they are engaging the elite and the relevant forums before and after your procurement.
Thank you very much. Let's have the next one, and then we'll have the
issue of tendering. There has been pronouncements on the cancellation
as well. The last point is that, this is a forum of professionals. Okay, so all of us are professionals, and some of us are contractors, but before they become contractors, are professionals. So we tend to sort of overlap to discuss issues of contractors, and we're not really discussing the issues of professionals. So I think that's part of the thing that we need to look into. How do we make sure that we then deal with the issue of the professional? For instance, how do you procure the professionals? The 30% and all those things. You probably find that it does not really apply to the professionals. Okay, so that's something that we need to do. Now the last point, I think it has been touched as well. When you look at provinces like Mpumalanga and Northwest, we have a lot of situation where our South African consultants are not working. But what our brothers and sisters are from across Limpopo, they're busy there. They're busy. Now, that's another issue that we need to look into. That I think a point was ready to say, whom are we empowering? There was a statement about the previously disadvantaged professionals, and even the Chinese today are previously disadvantaged. So how do we then make sure that through what we're doing, this transformation, we are not missing on the actual thing to make sure that we get the South Africans, to be part and parcel of the process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, I see Mr. Hall has been saying is the last one, all the points that have been mentioned. But the power vested in me as a program director, I think I will close the questions here. We are approaching 1 o'clock. And I want to just highlight that tomorrow we go to a commission, and that's where much of the discussions will take place. So please reserve your questions to them in the discussions. We could also have one-on-one with the speakers here. I'm going to allow the speakers to briefly respond to some of those matters, and as I said, much of the discussions will be held on when we have the commissions tomorrow. We want you to be there with the commissions, and that's where really much of the work will happen. Let's hear from the speakers now.
Thank you, Program Director. There are some of those questions that I will, if time allows, I'm going to refer to my colleagues, especially who are responsible for supply chain, just to fit it. But however, I'll try and wrap up on many of these. processes rolled out to our various areas of implementation. Of course, the last part is, which we haven't started, is the in-house construction activities, which has got a lot of impediments according to the assessment. But that's the ideal area where we need to go. The issues that were raised by my learned colleague, Mr. Hole, we take them into account. Indeed, those are positive contributions that we need to take as the champions of the industry as well, to ensure that we transform those particular areas. But I would like other colleagues also to speak, if they can, in terms of people outside the country or South Africa dealing with projects while the South Africans are not employed or having business which is supposed to be sourcing from the government. So I think other colleagues can also speak, not necessarily here in front. We have got a contingent of the professionals here. Let me also reiterate this particular point. The Treasury will also be probably coming on the tendering by professionals or the consultants. Indeed, this process, when it started, remember we used to use the so-called roster. Roster was based on the gazetted fees. But the process that actually we embarked on, it's a process where professionals have to give discount. And we have seen that particular process evolving. And we have seen the positive and we have seen the negatives. The negatives are this. They are the professionals who have been given huge discount to an extent that when they go on site, the products that they were producing were pathetic, to an extent that we have to terminate those services. So indeed, as a Department of Public Works, we raised this particular concern, but of course they were not necessarily received well, especially those who are responsible for the legislation. But we are also of the opinion that professionals should be procured in terms of the gazetted fee skills. In other words, we have a body that regulates these particular professional fees, and when we come to the appointment of those particular professionals, the fee scales are already predetermined, as we used to have. So that is an area which we and our National Treasury have to come to the point and agree on the practicalities that we are facing on the ground. I think I'll pause it here in the interest of time. If colleague has got anything to wrap up, we can also take it.
I think I'll just take 2 minutes to quickly go through some of the questions. The issue of BE being optional, our limitation is the FFA because it brings in the 80-20 points and the point system. So we cannot actually say it's compulsory. But if you remember very well, when we moved from the first regulations where we were using HDI and we moved to the BE scorecard, most service providers, consultants, whoever that were actually HDIs could no longer be awarded because they didn't have a certificate. Even though they were black, even though I was a woman, but I couldn't because I had a certificate. So also it had its own limitations. But the main point is that the point system, the act that enables us, does not give us the powers to actually make it a compulsory thing. With regards to SCM, as to who regulates it, currently there are discussions of establishing a council around it. There is no one that's currently regulating SCM because it's not, at the moment, it is not seen as a profession. It's just something that is sitting within the institution, as I was trying to explain, that particular unit is not responding to any particular industry. It's just looking at what National Treasury has issued. But now that we want institutions to implement a proper system where SCM will be industry specific or the product that they are procuring, that is actually what we are looking at, is something that is being discussed. With issues of reports being signed by accountants and professional engineers not being in the space, I'm assuming that there is an internal process, and I'm assuming that before the AG's report is signed, internal processes and due processes have actually been done in terms of consultation internally, but I'm assuming that the accountant is signing purely because in terms of their profession, the report should be signed by the accountant. I'm not sure whether I got that question correct, but as to who signs, I believe it's an internal process. And in terms of deviations from National Treasury up to a particular point, deviations are done internally, and from a particular point percentage, then it actually is submitted to National Treasury. So the only visibility that we have is from a particular point, 20% or 30%, depending whether it's construction or goods and services, but below that is a process that is taken internally. So I can only respond to that which is above 30% or 20%. In terms of SCM being a standalone, based on what is really required, SCM is a system within an institution, and if it is implemented as such, it will yield the results that we want. Once we really understand what is supply chain management, the challenge that we have is that we have no understanding what it is, mostly as supply chain practitioners ourselves. So once we start understanding and accounting officer taking responsibility for that, there will not be any need for SCM to be a standalone. However, within that system, there will be proper segregation of duties and also delegation of powers that will enable supply chain to maintain and also to implement the supply chain management system. Most of the issues, ladies and gentlemen, we have, I think this is important, that the regulations was not actually, it's not specifically for the construction space. It's for every sector within South Africa. So as we're actually having these discussions, it became very, very clear that it does not respond positively to the space that we're in right now. So what the decision that has been taken by the CPO is that we sit within our CPO and craft not the guide necessarily, and craft a document that responds to construction. We look at all the issues that have been raised, because all the issues that have been raised here, we're not hearing it for the first time. There is a discussion that is currently happening. We actually want to craft and actually expose some of these issues, these challenges of getting subcontractors before, and bring all those to the fore, because we're engaging CITB in those particular issues, and our engagement with Septelco strongly as well in some of the issues of professional, of our PSPs, all those kind of things. It's something that we are hoping that particular document will actually put in. So if I did not respond correctly, tomorrow I think in the commission and engagement going forward, we will actually bring clarity on some of the issues that we should have responded to. Thank you.
We thank you very much. I want to thank you very much as the speakers, and of course we also have a token of appreciation and want to present that. Could we kindly give them another round of applause, please? And so I want to just announce this, that after lunch, we're only going to have 2 intriguing talks, and then thereafter we're also going to have an opportunity for questions and answers. So I believe that if we have more time, we can also take some of the questions for the speakers as well. But we'll see how we manage that. It's important that we manage time. So just 2 announcements. So lunch will be served outside the restaurant area. I believe we're going to be guided in that regard. And then we're also informed here that the delegates can leave their belongings in the hall. The hall will indeed be locked, so at liberty to leave your belongings here. So let's then
you look beautifully different.
Observe the token of the thanks. Okay, we now want to then break for lunch. I think let's free everyone. So please enjoy your meals. Accordingly, we're going to resume at 6.